welcome to the Sacred Femme Alchemy podcast, a podcast to help you on your sacred feminine journey towards self-love and healing. I'm your host, Lisa Mae Francisco, a sacred feminine guide and mentor. In the podcast, we'll dive deep on how to heal your core wounds, reclaim your feminine power, and liberate your truth so you can be your wild, authentic self. Thanks so much for listening. I'm super excited that you're here. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Sacred Femme Alchemy podcast. I'm so excited that today we have a very special guest. Her name is Jazzmyn Proctor. Welcome, welcome. And Jazzmyn Proctor is a dedicated therapist, attachment coach, and host of the insightful podcast, All Our Parts. With a passion for holistic personal growth, Jazzmyn specializes in supporting individuals on their unique life journeys. Her approach recognizes the complexity of human experiences and the importance of addressing systemic challenges in personal development. Wow, there's so much that's packed in there, and I love it. And Jazzmyn and I actually know each other from a different program that we're in. So I'm so happy that we got to connect, and I found you on Threads, and we just started chatting. I listened to one of your podcast episodes about how you have healed your relationship to the feminine, and it was just really moving to me. And so I wanted to invite you and have you on here. So welcome today, Jazzmyn.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, amazing. And so what is your story? How did you start as a therapist, or what even prompted you on that road of becoming a therapist?
So I always knew I wanted to work in the mental health space. I took AP Psych in high school, and I was like, okay, yes, I want to understand people. I've always been so curious about wanting to know things, wanting to know more about people and why people do the things they do. So I undergrad majored in psychology, and then as I went through my master's program, I was able to get a better picture of what it would look like for me to be a therapist and now a business owner. So
How is that, being a business owner?
it's fun. I am a very creative person, and
Yeah.
therapy does not always offer that creative lens. Like, I've got to be very analytical. I've got to develop the treatment plan. And so having a business and being able to create content allows me to use the other side of my brain that I love so much.
And so how do you use the other side of your business? Or sorry, not of your business, but how do you use the other side in your business? Because you said sometimes you're not able to. And so what are some of the outlets that you have?
When I'm not in therapy, I love to paint, or when I'm not making content, I love painting. And painting became an opportunity to enjoy something without the need to be perfect. And I am a huge perfectionist. I love everything to be pretty. And I find painting to be much more intuitive, and it's such a personal experience for me. So I love to paint. I love to cook. I love to read. I love the reality TV. And like I like to have multiple things that allow me to just immerse myself and just enjoy them.
I love that. And I caught up on the whole, perfectionist. How has that relationship evolved in your life, or when did you first start to notice your relationship to perfectionism?
Young, I was an athlete in high school. I was always team captain, and I hated losing. And then even in undergrad, I think is when I really started to recognize the double-edged sword of it, is because I would always want to write a paper that was better than the one before. And to have that level of intention every single time, I would completely delete papers that I'd already started and start over if I didn't think it was good enough. And so I recognized it was taking up so much of my time. It was taking so much of my energy. Now, being in the space that I'm in as it relates to perfectionism and the relationship that I have with it, is a huge driving factor still, but it is not in the driver's seat all the time. It can't be. Sometimes I just have to allow myself the space to learn and grow and to not be good at something. And that is very, very hard and an uncomfortable space to be in. But it's also so much more enjoyable when I'm not holding myself to that expectation.
I feel you on that. I think for me, growing up as first gen, especially, it's embedded in an immigrant story, right? It's you don't want to bring any type of attention to you. And so one of the best ways to fly under the radar is just to be perfect. Because if you do have attention to you, maybe it's not the spotlight that you want.
Mhm.
Oftentimes it's negative of like, why are you in my country? Or you speak a different language or you sound different. And so there was definitely that perfectionism that was embedded in my world as yet as well. And so it's gotten to that point of, like you said, how do you overcome that and then start to enjoy life and allow yourself to make mistakes and be a
Mhm.
beginner? Because I still have those moments where if I'm doing something new, it's very uncomfortable. And for people to see that vulnerable side of you. And it's funny, it's like I'll talk about vulnerability all day, but when it comes to those moments of actually showing up in your vulnerability with your chest bare or something, it's still very difficult no matter how many times we try to tell ourselves like, okay, like we're on the line of like perfectionism. How do we move a little bit more towards the other sides of giving ourselves grace?
Yeah, 100%.
And speaking in terms of vulnerability, I know that I shared that I really enjoyed your podcast episode about your relationship and healing the sister wound, you're healing friendship wounds. Would love for you to expand more on that and just where you want to actually shine a light on how other people can heal. Maybe they have a certain friendship wound or a certain thing that they're going through right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I see amongst women to women friendships, especially, is the competition. And sometimes not always having space or feeling like someone's running past you or at a level that you're not quite at yet. And so for me, one of the most freeing things that I allow myself is to have unconditional celebration and support with my friends and recognizing our friendships are not attached to our productivity as people who work. Our worth is not attached to our accomplishments. And that is, I think my relationship to other people is also a reflection of the process of how I've built my relationship with myself. I
Mm,
grew up feeling like I was my accomplishments. I am what I achieve. I am only worthy if I am able to produce X, Y, and Z. And that left me feeling really empty. That left me feeling really lonely and always feeling not good enough. When I was able to recognize that was my relationship to myself, I was able to then turn it outward and say, I would never want my friends to feel this way. I would never want my friends to feel like on a bad day, they still have to produce and show up and be perfect. That's just not what I want for them. And so when I look at my relationships to others, I always think, okay, how can I cultivate a space where they feel unconditionally loved as themselves?
that's beautiful. I'm sure all your friends must feel so honored to have you by their side.
I hope so.
That's really beautiful. And so it wasn't, how did you experience competition? Did you ever feel like there was competition between you and a close friend? What was that like for you? And how did it show up in your life?
100%. I always used to think I would want to surround myself with people who were smarter than me, quote unquote, better than me. And what I found was just because I admired them for whatever the case may be, because of their intelligence, because of their way that they showed up or presented themselves, it didn't always mean that they respected me in return. And so that also is a reflection of my inability to communicate my boundaries at the time because I wanted the relationship to work so bad.
Mm,
Uh and so oftentimes I found myself in relationships where we were competing for the same thing. We wanted to be on the same board. We wanted the same positions. And so we've
Oh, wow.
constantly found ourselves in the same race. And I've lost a lot of friendships where we were trying to be in the same space. We were
Mm-hmm.
applying for the same things. Either I got it or they got it. And it was just so uncomfortable. And I was like, I don't want any of my relationships based on this. And so I really had to do my own work as to looking at myself and saying, okay, what do I think I'm lacking that I feel the need to look at it from an external lens, or look at it from another person, or what is it that I need to believe that I already have in myself to better
Mm.
have better relationships with people.
And so, with most of those friendships where you felt like you were competing with them, are you still friends with some of them now?
No,
Did you have that aha moment? Did anyone call you out? Or was it yourself that you called,
it was
your
myself that I called out because there were
Mhm.
also a lot of other dynamics at play, like the respect piece.
Mm.
I used to always be really shy of sharing my opinion because, again, I want to be liked. I want people around me. And so I found when I was sharing my opinion more often as well within these similar friendships, they're like, oh, I didn't realize you would disagree with that, or that's not the
Mm.
response I was expecting from you. And I found that I was having to edit myself so much. And I also found that they were also competing with me, like the jealousy of
Mhm.
achievement, worth, and even confidence is something that comes up a lot in tandem with female friendships, especially as if one person's confident and the other isn't, that can be really challenging. And so I'm not friends with a lot of people where jealousy has come up. And
Mhm.
if jealousy does come up, it's something that I've had to call out because a lot of times it comes out in bickering or in backhanded compliments. And you want
Mhm.
people who celebrate you. And so if they're, you can sense the bitterness behind, congrats. Oh, of course it's you. Da, da, da. I'm like, you
Wow.
keep it over there.
Mhm. So do you think that someone can still be friends with someone that is jealous of them?
It is very hard.
Yeah.
It is something that both of you have to work at. The other person has to be willing to own the fact that your confidence or your ability to achieve X, Y, and Z is uncomfortable for me.
Mm.
And they have to own that that's a them problem and not
Yeah.
a me problem. And then for the other person, what does it look like to keep a relationship with them? You might keep a relationship with them and it looks different in that you don't share everything, in that it stays
Mm.
very surface level, or that you stick to group outings with that person. And so if
Mhm.
the relationship is something that is valuable and worth maintaining, restructuring it, reframing it. Okay, I can't share. I'm not interested in sharing X, Y, and Z with you. That's okay. This is where our relationship can then live.
I find that so difficult because I have had friendships where it was obvious and it was like openly discussed that
Mm-hmm.
there was jealousy. And like what you were mentioning, how sometimes you might have to omit certain information. And it was hard. I couldn't stay in the relationship because for me, if I have to omit information because you can't handle it because of your jealousy, that's your problem. Then I feel like I can't be like myself in the relationship. So what's the point of having a friendship? Because
Yeah.
that's where I see it going. And then another woman just ghosted me and I was like, okay, that is your problem. And I
Mm-hmm.
see this all the time. I see it all the time in social media. Maybe someone has a certain achievement or milestone. I see this a lot with marriage, pregnancies. Maybe it's difficult for you or you're not at that place. And so it's just let me unfollow a couple of people. And it's not necessarily malicious, but that's one way I've seen people own their jealousy around it of just choosing to not opt in or be around people that do make them jealous.
Yeah. It's maintenance on both sides. And as someone who is always interested in evolving and growing, I will say I cannot have jealousy very close to me. And it's something that I
Mm.
can sense. It's something that I can pick up pretty quickly. And I have had friends that I still have who have expressed jealousy, and
Mm.
they were like, that's a them problem. And I'm like, yes. And so it's been a restructuring. It's not too many. It's not, it can't be
Yeah.
a lot, but it's all in what I think the foundation of the relationship is on.
Yeah. And it's also an opportunity for the person that has that in their spiritual curriculum to do the work, right? So it's, I'm jealous of this. So obviously there's something within me that I'm hiding because I actually want that thing that I'm jealous of. And so how
Yeah.
can I go after that? And I just think of people, this is how I've learned to reframe it. If I'm jealous of someone, that's just like a walking vision board for me. I'm like,
Mm.
okay, I actually want that. I don't
Hmm.
need to be jealous of them. They're an expansion for me. They're a model for me, an example of what it could look like. And one of my teachers, she said, when it happens, just say, source, I want that, but something more aligned to me, something better.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so that's just helped so much.
Yeah. I don't get jealous often. And
Mm-hmm.
that to everything I've just spoken to previously, I have done the work in those areas. And it's so freeing to be able to look at my relationships and look at my friends and say, I genuinely love that for you because this isn't a race. We're not competing, we're not in the same boat. And having that lingering feeling of, oh, they're doing X and Y, Z better than me. I'm like, great, you're doing it. I just love that you
Mm-hmm.
are doing it because it's not personal. And then if I personalize it, that's something that I have to sit with. That has nothing to do with what they're doing with their lives.
Exactly. And I love that you feel that. You feel that like genuine celebration for them of, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. And I love that for you. And so tell me in regards to friendship wounds, how attachment plays towards it. Like what, I don't know if you want to define what your attachment style is or how it has evolved, but would love to know your hot takes about it.
So I am a healing avoidant. I used to
Hmm.
just really fear vulnerability and closeness in a pretty significant way. I didn't like conflict, but I also couldn't handle compliments. I couldn't handle feeling like someone was emotionally impacting me because I didn't have the skills yet to know how to emotionally regulate or sit with disappointment if someone were to abandon me. Hate the idea of being abandoned. And so having to put all of that on the table for myself and do the work and recognize, okay, Jazzmyn, you have an abandonment fear. Like that's a huge wound for you. You have
Mm-hmm.
a fear of being misunderstood and you have a fear of closeness and people getting close to you and then them leaving. How do you allow all of that to exist and still form closer relationships? Now I can only have depth in a lot of my relationships. I can't do a lot of surface level. I don't want to meet you for coffee and catch up on like the highlights of your life. Like I love
Mm-hmm.
being in someone's corner within my relationships. And so it's a pretty 180 when I describe the two side by side. Uh, but it's been much more fulfilling to allow myself to be seen by other people, knowing that it's not a forever relationship, but I now have the tools and the skill set and the awareness that it will hurt, it will suck if it ends, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. How did you know that you needed to fix it?
When I would just be so heartbroken when something didn't go the way that I was hoping or expected, and heartbroken in a way that like I can't get out of bed. I am
Mm-hmm.
that scarcity mindset kicks in that no one else will love me in the way that this person loved me, or I'll never have a relationship that looks like this again. And so that fear of loneliness, when I recognized how like crippling it was at times, I was like, okay, I don't want to jade myself so much that I'm living in this space
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many people out there who you have not met yet who will be so in line with where you're going. And so if you shield yourself, you'll miss out on all of that. And I was like, I don't want to miss out on. And once I became more aware and realized there was the potential to miss out on something, I was like, okay, I need to do the work first before I let people in. Because I recognize, I actually made a video on it yesterday of vulnerability is a relationship with myself just as much as it is with a relationship to the other person in terms of trust.
Mm-hmm.
I can be open with another person and trust that person, and that's super important. But I also have to trust myself that I am making the best choice for myself, and that if something happens, I trust myself to be there for me and to pick myself back up if it goes wrong.
Mm-hmm. Oh, of course. It's like your relationship is in direct proportion with your relationship with other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much do you trust yourself, right? Will allow you to learn how to trust another person.
Yeah.
And how did your attachment style show up in friendships?
Oh, I used to have a lot of really surface level friends,
Mm-hmm.
especially in high school. I was in a lot of friend groups. I was never super close with anybody. I really don't speak to anyone from high school still or undergrad even. I
Mm-hmm.
have a few friends from undergrad, but I don't have the childhood friendships that a lot of people have. They can say, "Oh, I've known this person for 20 years." Like I don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to think that was such a personal moral failing, and I used to be I used to be jealous of. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I can't keep relationships." And then I recognized that was my own fear. It was when I reflect back on a lot of friendships that could have been something more. I recognize the moments where I protected myself and shielded myself because that is what I knew at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it certainly didn't allow for me to deepen that relationship or be able to see it grow and foster into something more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At one point, it just becomes unfulfilling, right? And you just have that wake up moment of, okay, I want something more. I want something deeper in my life that's
Yeah.
just enriching and fulfilling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what are you currently working on right now, personally?
Oh man, I am right now working on healing my inner teenager. So a lot of us
Mm,
talk about the inner child, the playful nature of it, the light work, but right now I am really digging in to a 15-year-old who really just wanted to be loved and who
mhm,
didn't know how to be loved and didn't know how to give or receive love and certainly had to raise themselves in a way, had to teach themselves a lot just to figure it out and go day to day. So I'm really working on really nurturing her and not being so hard on her because that is
mm,
where a lot of my perfectionist parts come up. That's where a lot of my shame parts come up. And being able to look at her and say, you were literally doing everything that you could, like you knew to do. There was nothing, if you could wave a magic wand, there is nothing differently that you could do because you didn't know. And so giving
mm,
her some space to finally surface and come up has been really hard, but game
mhm.
changing.
What's an example of a practice that you do that other people can take away with?
I think identifying the parts piece is one that's really helpful. So as I've identified, I have the perfectionist part. And so for an example, if I am working on something and I find myself frozen and I maybe start procrastinating or I don't do it at all, I sit back and I ask myself and I reflect on, am I not doing this because of my capacity? Am I tired? Or am I afraid
Mhm,
of messing this up or not doing this in the way that I expect myself to? Or am I afraid of not doing it perfectly? Do I have the
mhm,
vision in my head? And then if I don't execute it in real time, what does that look and feel like? And so being able to decipher those two things has really allowed me the space to take a step back and make more thoughtful choices within my work and in
mhm.
my relationships, but also not be so hesitant.
Mm. As you were saying that, the word that just kept coming up was just an anchor. And it's just really apparent how much work that you've done, how thoughtful you're and reflective you are about how you learn to nurture yourself and being really self-aware. I think it's
Yeah.
just really apparent in your journey.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, of course. And so I love that. And when people, I don't know, come to you for working with their inner teenager, how do you know the difference between it's my inner child, it's my inner teenager? Because like you said, not many people talk about their inner teenager. So how does one get into that?
I think we look at the developmental stages of each. So
Mm-hmm.
when we're a child, we are just learning how to form relationships. We are just learning what autonomy means for us. We are just learning. And then the adolescent teenage period is when we start to put those things into practice. And so
Mm-hmm.
what are the hurdles or the wounds that we found ourselves stuck in? And so that can be when that comparison, well, we're constantly comparing ourselves to our peers. I'm not an athlete. I'm not a first chair in band. Like when you're in school,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many ways to rank us as a certain thing. Varsity, junior varsity, like you're always being matched up. And so when we hear that voice of, oh, I don't compare to this person, or I didn't quite meet the mark here in terms of my ability, when that starts blaring, that's the adolescent teenage part of ourselves that is itching to be seen, to be chosen, to
Mm-hmm.
be validated, especially if we didn't get that validation as a teenager. It's a very different uh, part. And it's also the more challenging part because that's where a lot of the anger is. That's where a lot of resentment is, shame, because you've experienced more. You're becoming more aware,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be a good thing. And sometimes it's not.
Yeah, you make me want to watch Inside Out too. Because I think it's where she's 13. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like noticing, okay, where does that fall? Because I've done a lot of inner child work, but I haven't dabbled into a lot of the teenage years of my life. Thank you for highlighting that.
Of course, I loved Inside Out too. And I won't do as big spoiler, but I love the way that they portray anxiety in the sense
Ooh.
that anxiety is great. And I even when I'm working with my clients, I say anxiety is normal. Like we are supposed to be afraid of something hot that could burn us. We're supposed to be
Mm,
cautious of how we drive and put our seatbelt on. Like anxiety is a great response. It is
mm,
when anxiety takes over and completely shifts our perception of our reality and we start to make choices that are like not in alignment with who we are, and
mhm,
they're mostly impulsive or irrational or uh, something that feels protective, that keeps us in the best case scenario, the most protected scenario of who we are. And I love that it really highlights the differentiation of those two things.
Oh, I love that. It's just, and it's also a journey in itself of identifying your emotions and then also being okay with it and learning that it is a necessary part of life. Like you said, anxiety's fine. And so it's learning to really merge those opposite or polarizing emotions and understanding
Mhm.
that in a way they are the same thing.
Yeah.
I love that. And where can people find you?
Find me on my website, Unilome Wellness LLC. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram. If you are in Maryland and DC, I am accepting new therapy clients, and then I am also accepting coaching clients on my container, which you can find all of this information on my website. And then I do have a podcast titled All Our Parts. It is a weekly show where we delve into all things spirituality, all things relationships, which I cannot wait to interview Lisa and have her on in the upcoming months. So, yeah, that's where you can find me. I love to engage and love to hear people's questions and thoughts.
Amazing. Do you have any last minute, I don't know, insights you want to share?
It's a very interesting time in the astrological world right now. And so I think the
Mhm.
best thing that I can offer is to show yourself grace during this time period. I
Mm-hmm.
think so much is being illuminated for so many of us. And I think we can feel the nudge to want to make shifts, and we want to feel like we have to do something right now. And you don't. You can sit with it, ponder on it, see what it looks like in your own life, and then make those shifts in tandem. But just know you are going like at the right pace, and you get to show yourself some kindness right now.
Beautiful. I feel like this episode could be titled just self-love, right? It's like how you've really learned to transition from maybe those parts that you wanted to hide, and then now just creating this totally revolutionary 180 of everything, whether it's the attachment style, whether it's jealousy, looking at different friendship wounds, and now it's really beautiful to see you glow and share your work with the world through your different platforms as well.
Thank you. It's when we allow those harder parts, those bad parts to start to feel seen, it's amazing. A, how many people actually relate to it and how not alone we are. And a lot of times when we're in those experiences, it does feel isolating because it's our experience. But there's so many people that can relate to feeling that way. And the more that I've allowed myself to be seen in that, in those spaces, and not just when I'm great and perfect and doing well, I've been able to better accept myself.
Mhm. Yes. And I love that plug for really just showing that vulnerability, right? Because it might seem that it's only unique to our experience, but you'll be surprised about how many people can relate. So the more you share, the messier you are, like just go all in. It doesn't have to be perfect. And really learning to embrace the imperfection allows it to be perfect.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jazzmyn. It was wonderful having you here. And I can't wait to include everything on the show notes. But thank you all for tuning in and listening. And I will catch you on the next episode. Bye, everyone.